Good evening and good morning, depending on where you are. And welcome to the second in the series of webinars being organized by Kala Chopal. Our theme today is Vasudhaiva Kutum. Let me just make a very short introduction. I don't want to keep you for very long from our artists. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a Sanskrit phrase which broadly translates to the world is one single family. And it is only the small minded who discriminate between kin and strangers, while for the magnanimous, the entire world is a family. Connected through universal principles of truth, compassion, consciousness, wisdom, justice, pursuit of these held together with a sense of sharing and responsibility for our actions and their consequences, and interdependence, where cultural, ecological, spiritual diversity is valued. The conflict sometimes lay between an institutionalized practice, whether they are religious, political, social, or even cultural, and the individual. And this becomes an entry point for how each one of us continue to strive to liberate ideas from institutions as artists. We have today three eminent artists from across three continents, united in a common pursuit. For instance, Mary's work on cultural history and environment, human response, grief, trauma, threats of extinction. Despina's work spans across cultural narratives. She works with childhood memories and the individual practitioner working with cultural stereotypes. Gigi's repertoire of working with migrancy and displacement, alienation, prejudice within local political economies of urban cultures. Each one of them challenging their own history, their own memories, and the spaces that they inhabit. To introduce myself very briefly, I'm trained as a filmmaker and an anthropologist, and I work extensively at the intersection of visual, material culture research, and representation. Much of my work is around oral histories, material cultures, and visual archives of the Western Himalayas, engaging with nuances of cultural ecology and conservation. I have been fortunate to have worked across audiovisual mediums, pedagogy, conservation, and curated a number of exhibitions, which gives me the background to relate to a number of aspects to each of our participants' practices. I shall very briefly introduce the artists. This is in no manner trying to summarize the exhaustive bodies of work that they represent, but merely an entry point to how they have decided to broach the theme today. Mary Ting is a visual artist working in installation, drawing, sculpture, and community projects that examine cultural history, grief, and nature. Her varied work reflect on stories of devotions and of desperations. She has been an ardent supporter of earth justice and a variety of environmental causes for more than 25 years. Mary currently teaches at the CUNY John Jay College in the Studio Art Department and the Sustainability and Environmental Justice Program. Mary has a bachelor's degree from the Parsons School of Design in New York and a diploma from the Central Academy of Fine Arts, Beijing in Chinese folk art studies, and a master's degree from the Vermont School of Fine Art. She currently resides in New York.
Thank you so much, Abir, Lenica, and Helen. I'm about to start. I'm sorry about that. I was born in a house that was located at once in the suburbs of Long Island, New York, circa 1961, of Lost in Space on the TV downstairs, and in the bedrooms above, the ghosts of 1937, running, fleeing, the Nanjing Massacre, the bodies, and my mom at age 10. People ask me, what language is spoken in the house? Shanghainese? English? Both, I answer, but really it was the language of silence, the love of nature, and the violence of humans. As a child, my mom told me of her college days on the campus of Jinling Girls College in Nanjing, with its Ming Dynasty architecture, underground brooks, and nesting herons. One day, a young American boy came into the campus with a gun, his birthday present. He shot the herons till he ran out of bullets. My mom picked them up, the herons, as many as she could, their legs, necks dangling over her arms, and carried them back to the biology lab. She stuffed them, as many as she could. This was the same site where just 8 years prior, the International Committee endeavored to hide the girls from the Japanese soldiers and their bayonets. Their stories were my bedtime tales. And the women, their bodies, the birds, and their dangling legs and beaks were one and the same. For me, it has always been that way, their bodies side by side. History, government policy had shaped our family, my art, and our lives. My father was here in the US, his family in China, separated for 3 decades by politics. The giant void, the tsunami of the great cultural revolution, the purges, the parades, the flip-flop of history. Intellectuals, once renowned, the next day deemed enemies of the state. And who were the witches? Who were they other than widows? Women who were left without a man to defend them, dragged out when needed, accused, paraded, beaten in public, names often forgotten. I dreamed of being a forest ranger, a forest protector, and along the way, I became an artist. But I never forgot the forest. My siren call for nature began in the 80s, grew to a 4-alarm, a 5-alarm, a never-ending wail. Guanyin, the deity of mercy, compassion, who perceives the cries of all in need, everyone loves her. Mothers tell their children, if you have compassion in your heart, your life will be fuller. My mom, a bio major, lover of art and animals, loved these statues. She revered their delicate, deep carving and said the ivory came from the elephant cemetery, a secret place where the bones of the elephants were kept. But elephants and elephants like us grieve for the dead. But while elephants do grieve, there are no elephant cemeteries except the ones we create. And now we have generations of PTSD babies of so many species. How did we get to this wretched place of being? And I cannot follow the Confucian concept of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, because with that comes the notion of look the other way, don't cause trouble, don't speak out. The monkeys definitely do see, hear, and speak of evil, are evil. By the 2000s, the slaughter of wildlife for dead parts were in the tons, beyond comprehension. We call it confiscation porn. We no longer have words to describe, no adjectives ugly enough. Lost lives are externalities, bycatch, overburden. We are in the time of great and continual biocultural diversity loss. This is not okay. Normal was abnormal. Last year, a continent on fire, 1 billion animals incinerated alive. This year, a virus leaping across species and oceans. Don't blame the animals. We tore down their homes, crammed them into tiny spaces and ripped their parts out. No wonder they got sick, and then so did we. We might have the internet and drones, but we are still animals. We too grieve and share their diseases. But we are still here. So much to restore, so much to do. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I have taken the liberty to paste your website link on the chat box. We are going to take some questions, but we'll take it at the end of the session. So I request you to either paste your questions in the chat box or save them for the end when we can address it to each individual speaker. I shall now move on and try and introduce Despina. Well, it's very difficult. Despina is, she's had a prolific career. She specializes in painting, printmaking, typography, graphic design, and video. Her work exemplifies a common theme of capturing and reconstituting her own perception of truth from layers of memory, as well as from mediation of social media-induced stereotypes. Her journey has enabled her to communicate with variant individuals and that come from dissimilar backgrounds and gain a greater understanding of the differences and semblances that create this dichotomy of truth and representation. Despina was born in Alexandria in Egypt. Her education was at the Visual Art at Kent Institute of Art and Design in the UK. She currently lives in Greece. She speaks multiple languages, including Greek, English, Arabic, and French. Despina, we are very, very eager to listen to you. If you are ready, please let us know.
Yes, hello, everybody. I'm Despina Neymaroglu, and I consider myself a storyteller. My art has evolved from social documentation. One of my main preoccupations over the years has been the mutual relationship between reality and its representation, truth and fiction, social and political facts and their distortion by the media. Lately, a mixture of images deriving from the past keep emerging from the subconscious. The identity issues. Being born and raised in Egypt within an international society bearing dissimilar identities, languages, religions, in an era during which the European society was still very prominent due to socio-political reasons of those times, made me aware from an early age of the way identities are carved in our subconscious. It helped me discover and face up the other. Today, my presentation will revolve around three recent projects. First, Reconstructing Paradise, 2017. Second, The Voyage of 2019. And third, The War and Peace, 2018, which define my identity issues about memory, life and death, and the human condition. Reconstructing Paradise is a multimedia installation associated with my childhood spent in Minya, a beautiful town along the Nile in Upper Egypt. The family apartment I grew up in became, in my memory, a symbolic paradise. It became my soul house, a personal refuge, an idyllic place, an idea borrowed from the ancient Egyptians' faith in the afterlife. The soul houses were pottery offering trays, often molded to include a model of a house, and are associated with tombs dating from the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. Some have spouts allowing liquid to be ritually poured over the soul house and flow away. It has been suggested they were used to mark the tomb on the surface. This is an excerpt from a video, from my video entitled Soul House. Very important. Very good. In my video entitled Soul House, was depicting the family's abandon of our home during our final departure from Egypt in the 60s. The recorded Arabic lullaby from my childhood memory was recited by a 6-year-old Egyptian refugee girl in Athens in 2016. The Voyage is a life-size model of an Egyptian Middle Kingdom sarcophagus made of wooden planks similar to the ones recently unearthed 9 meters below the surface at the Deir el-Bersha necropolis near the Nile Valley of my native town, Minya, in Upper Egypt. For this work, I traced back my very own origins. The interior of the coffin is populated with imagery responding to episodes from my own life. The chosen autobiographical scenes appear on a par with the ancient Egyptian narrative canon involving the roots of land and water as the way to the afterlife. Finally, War and Peace. My work revolves around the ambiguity of the image and the attempt to reach the other. The issues that engage my thoughts are anthropocentric series of works that derive from socio-political matters. Some time ago, while watching the international news, I was triggered by the image of a woman unfolding her red rug in a refugee camp in northern Syria. In her, I immediately recognized Antigone, who was forbidden to bury her brother Polynices, as portrayed in the homonymous ancient Greek tragedy by Sophocles. That connection led to my fruitful research and collaboration with a rug manufacturing company in India, resulting in the fabrication of my prayer rug, entitled War and Peace, which you see in an installation. And this is the disabled, the immigrant, the refugee, the stateless, the exiled, form part of an increasing nomadism, characters of uprooting, a life based on a perpetual motion, which becomes a destination, an unattainable destination of a nostalgic origin. It is dedicated to all the refugees and migrants around the world. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Despina. It was a pleasure listening to you as usual. Well, for our other guests, I have pasted a link to Despina's webpage. Please feel free to go and look at it, and please post your questions. I'm going to save them and address them to the speakers at the end of the session. We now move on to the third and final presenter for this evening. GIGI SCARIA's artwork focuses on issues surrounding the implications of rapid urbanization. Highly experimental, he works with several media such as installations, screen prints, photography, painting, and sculpture. He's also involved with welfare projects and expresses activism thoughts, art for school, and political change. Born in Kothanallur, Kerala, GIGI completed his bachelor's degree in painting from the College of Fine Arts in Thiruvananthapuram and his master's degree in the same from Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi. He has also illustrated children's books and taught art at an experiment school in New Delhi, where he currently resides. I would now request GIGI, if I can, yeah, if you can please start. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Abir. Thank you, everyone, for attending this very exciting event. Thank you all those of especially Linika, for inviting me for this event. Just to begin with, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam world is one single family, which is the kind of theme probably we are addressing in this particular session. I was also thinking about, why the universal entity or understanding of a family, as we all say, that how that actually has been excluded many people or many situations. Many people, not just people, I mean, all kinds of species from this world family. So that was my major concern. That's what I thought I would, in a way, address in different sections here. And my concerns would actually go from human condition, space, architectural spaces, and contexting spaces of architecture and social spaces, as well as environment as in all. And I'll be, I mean, this is actually not a very kind of chronologically ordered, arranged slides. And just starting off with this city unclaimed, which you can see right away here. This was a wallpaper which I made in 2012. In fact, what you see in the image, I mean, I don't know how clearly it is visible. It's a large scale wallpaper print, which has been made took a lot of time even to construct. It's a completely constructed, but all the photographs are taken from Delhi and surrounded areas of the city. And if you look at the center, that is where the slums and the people from the migrant labor to anyone and everyone who could actually cannot claim the city are placed, and the rest is surrounded by the people, those who have, maybe in the middle class, upper middle class, and the corporates, and that is how the distribution is being taken place in this particular picture. Just move on to the next one, which is titled All About This Side. This talks about a space, it is the opposite of a mall, which is very close to Noida, where you have had these barricades, which is permanently placed in order to prevent the other side of the people, those who are not encroaching to the space to disturb the others, those who are coming to the mall for purchasing or whatever. So, I mean, we also talk a lot about the social distancing these days, and but there are extremely interesting examples of social distancing we practice in so many levels, in so many ways throughout our life. But whereas when it comes to a pandemic, then we obviously have even the word using social distancing, it might be physical distancing, but social distancing is the overall impact of every physical distancing which we keep. And this is the it's a long stretch of area in which I was kind of walking and taking photographs in order to stitch it together to make this long paper work, which is titled All About This Side. Move on to the next. This is taken a little long back, and where you see the construction site, and there were I mean, if you look closely into the picture, it's actually a mirror image of one image, which was extended as like a single extended space, where from one side of it, I kind of removed the people's presence. I mean, which you can't actually see it from this slide, but in the actual photograph, it was very visible. So the what you see here is the shackle or like temporary spaces for the people, migrant laborers to stay, and they move on to next places. And this was quite a common scene ever since 2005 onwards in Delhi, because the massive constructions were taking place in different parts of the city. And moving on to another one, which I mean, I call it biography, but this is actually a belongings or the presence of a migrant labor, all encapsulated in a inside a shop in a shutter, which is a space is in construction. This another work titled "Someone Left a Horse on the Shore." I mean, I'm kind of slightly moving from the personal narrative of a human condition to a more of a wider boundaries of the city, and how the land has actually been taken over, and how the extensive extension of the city has been taking place by the rural areas are encroaching by the land mafias. So this work will come in that sense very prominent in terms of the Trojan horse and the betrayal of the people by hiding inside and coming out and taking over the land overnight. So it's in a way represent the idea of Trojan horse. What was it for? But then it extends to the idea of how the rural areas are being taken over by the land mafias. And this is it's a wooden structure. It's a wooden horse, and compared slightly bigger in size. And this, in fact, the black and white version is the one which was shown, but this is the real color side of the space. Another work, it's unfortunately I don't have enough time to show the video, but this is called amusement park. Also extending the idea of how the cityscape has actually been converted into an amusement park, and how exactly the urban spaces are in order to deal with the situations. I mean, it is very relevant in the present situation of how you actually even manage crisis, and how, I mean, when you switch a button, you can shut the whole city at one go, because the infrastructure and everything which is supporting the system has to come from the outside of it all the time. So all these were constructed based on the real images. Then it is animated, and it actually runs through more like a clockwise and anti-clockwise running machine. That is how the video has been made. Another work, many of these interventions are also based on the space, how the social space is getting extended by the kind of weird usage of our own kind of very different ways of understanding and architectural ways of measuring the space, and also even creating an aesthetics of it by a very different means. So you see the colossal structures and gigantic things around, which probably sometimes in the city you probably won't be able to understand what is it for. So within that, from that perspective, I have made certain different sculptures, which were all in a way kind of intruding these social spaces, and I kind of make the structure and placed it over there and take pictures, and then remove it from the site. So the wheel is one of it, and this wheel is actually placed in Mumbai in another show. The background is ceiling in Mumbai, and this is another one, settlement, which also talks about the ever-present perpetual destroying of the habitat. Yet again, you are kind of moving with it in a way that you're building over, you're removing it, and you are demolishing places, as well as you're moving ahead with it. So it's a it's a one way of destruction, and other way of creating. It's also making it differently for different people. That has actually been a very complex mechanism in which most of the cities operates. So this was something which was came as a work. It's a sculpture, again, wooden, large in scale, also placed in different locations. Another one of the similar kind, where you see that a lot of electric posts, which are basically waiting for the electricity to come. And this was one of the kind of peripheries of the city, very close to Rohini, where I used to reside. And I kind of superimposed this structure, which is a post, electric post with apartments, and placed over there to take pictures. This was another very interesting project where I was working with um, an activist and a curator, Ravi Agarwal, who has invited me to participate in a water-based project, which actually has been working on two cities, one in Germany, a river called Elbe, and Yamuna in Delhi. So I was invited to take part in the Yamuna project, where I have constructed a fountain of purification. It's quite large scale fountain in which the water will be sucked in from the Yamuna river, and it goes up and shoot on the almost like 70 feet height, and which goes back again into the river. And depending upon the wind, where it falls. And this is the night scene. And the idea behind this was also to invite people to see we have a river, and what is the condition in which that is kind of right now exists. So fountains are always in a sense, in every civilization, the fountains were being used in order to people to gather together and have some relaxing moments, and it's much more of a social space. So here you are actually witnessing a fountain where you really have to look into this matter very clearly, that what exactly you are sharing with that water around. And it is stinging water from the Yamuna, which actually shows the highest pollution level of the river. And this one was done in Norway in a residency program, which, as you can see, is there is one side is a house, and the other side is a mountain, and exactly the same mountain which is actually standing next to, which is on my side. When I look at it in the morning outside, then I see this Uksen mountain. That is where I was staying, the other side of it. And I kind of incorporated these two in order to say, what is the balance between the making as well as the natural, natural spaces which we have. How to create this balance. This was the idea. And coming to the last, this is a video I would like to show, which actually incorporates the different refugee camps from all over the world in order to create a video work. And I might run it for 2 minutes, and that would be the end of the presentation. Just a second.
You. there's a very interesting comment from Helen, and I think it's a good way to enter into a conversation while we receive sort of more comments from the audience. um, you speak about this kind of coexistence, and you speak about this sort of in your images there's a very sort of clear sort of us and them, like the ones behind the grills and the one looking at it. uh, do you feel that in the current circumstances that we are going through, that it further makes us, because you also referred to, while you were showing us that screen about the amusement park, about how we manage crisis and so on. So would you like to perhaps say a little bit more about how you sort of contextualize this work and how it perhaps changes or gets affected by what we are going through right now? And then I think we should ask this question to everyone else as well, but we can start with you because you're already on the mic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting to think about it, because as I was pointing out about the social distancing factor, that how, and there are people, those who actually very easily make a certain easy kind of decision that see, we have already been in that stage because of we are not maintaining certain things. It's a very easy way for others to say that we should actually go back to some sort of an old time, whether it is medieval or pre-medieval, I have no clue, where they are actually coming up from with these ideas. But at the same time, what we are also kind of in a way completely collapsing with the idea of how the social understanding is taking place, whether I mean, are we only understand it in the way of chaos, or is there any other way we could understand what society means? And I mean, that actually goes into each and every sections and every pockets of our urban life as well as rural life. I mean, this is not a criticism. This is more like an observation, how exactly we cope up with the idea of living together. And, when we talk about the universal family is something which is, it's not even an utopia for me. It's beyond that. I mean, you will never achieve it because of so many other reasons. I mean, this is just a comment, and others can join. Thank you.
Sure. Despina, would you like to say a few words about how perhaps the last couple of months, or the kind of what Helen calls the weight of our times, have you had a chance to kind of think about it, and how it might actually affect some of the work that you're planning in the future, or the way that you're thinking?
Yes. What I saw during these 4 months of lockdown, really, in our lives, and while watching the news continuously of what's happening around me and around the whole world, I see a very profound political upheaval coming our way, which I think it's due, of course, to the present virus, which has brought us to this situation. And it will make us wake up in a way, hopefully, and see how we can fix from now on our life on this planet, including everything. The way we treat nature, the way we treat human beings, the way we treat animals, and all that, how we can stop the wars and become less less dependent on money making, because this is another problem that we are facing now. So I think this has given us a lot of, at least it has given me a lot of food to think for my mind.
Okay, we'll come back to you, but let me get a quick comment from Mary as well. Mary, of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what we are going through right now. But, there was a little more of a specific inquiry that came where, and I just read it, the way that you use the image, the painting of your mom, the made by your mother, and then the ivory statues. I mean, we had discussed it a little bit, but I suppose you kind of, we might have gone over it during your presentation. If you could slowly tell us a little bit about that, and then perhaps also tell us what you're thinking and how the current times have affected your practice.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of that's just Photoshop. I mean, my mom also painted, and so after she passed away and I was dealing with looking at those statues, which I had now inherited, which was a real conundrum and a problem for me. That artwork was a way of me kind of working through and re-examining the situation. It was also something that I did to also share with other Chinese or anyone who comes in contact with ivory. So it's just a Photoshop job. And then also contacting Andrew Takalo, who is like an elephant whisperer. And those images of the slaughtered elephants was a herd that she had been following for years, and they were slaughtered. So it's just really good old Photoshop. But as far as my comments on this, I mean, this topic is something that I've been very involved with for a number of years. So even though I couldn't have said this is the year we'd have a pandemic of this nature, certainly it has been known that they have been brewing and that there are thousands of such viruses, and there will be more. Just a few minutes ago, there was a CNN alert that the bubonic plague is back in Mongolia, and that's from eating marmots. So we will have many, many more, and we will continue to until we really change our ways. And that goes back to what GIGI was saying about this whole notion of one family, and I would term it as coexistence. I mean, I also don't expect us to have this happy family, right? It's more like, because really, who has a really happy family? It's more like coexistence. Can we manage to work it out that we don't have to, depopulate each other, gas and coal and shoot each other? Can we exist? And that's really all it's about, is exist, right? Can we share this little piece of land? So for me, it just leads to more and more research. So I also do talks about history. I'm doing one coming up about how did we get here? And it goes through wildlife demand history and the pandemics to explain where we are now. So until we really change on a major way, which means governments, I think, it's really hard for us individuals to make. I think we all have to still keep on working and try and shift the powers, but we really do need their help. So that's my food for thought on that.
Can I move on to a question for Gigi? Yeah. Mary just spoke about research, and I had this on the top of my mind that I'll ask you. Gigi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. So, each time I see your images, whether it's in a gallery or whether on a presentation like this, it always, I always wonder that how do you research your material? Because, there is a very, there is a kind of artist's gaze or the artist's eye that is kind of present. But, there is a very diverse, again, going back to like what Mary was saying, that, this sort of coexistence that we are constantly trying to question, about, this whole, I don't know whether you agree, but, I always feel that there is this very clear articulation of this us and them, that there is someone like us who are looking at a particular kind of space that you're trying to create and then forcing us to kind of reflect upon it. So my real question to you was that, how do you come about and research these very complex, these very dense compositions that you create?
So that, I mean, it's been a long time researching in the sense of it's rarely it's a field work. I've been walking all around and taking pictures. That's one thing. And also it's also, for me, the research is not taking as a separate entity. I mean, it's actually a part of the way in which you look and understand each and every moment. So it's been a more than maybe even the journey begins after 12 years of intense living in the city. That could be one way I can say that, where is it coming from? And as far as the distance which you see is coming out in these pictures are also, it has a very interesting position. It's not, I mean, what happens that, I mean, of course you could observe from within, from the whole, and it's also, you can actually have a very open look from a bird's eye view, or any kind of perspective which you kind of, and I was very keen and interested in this many kind of views which can be added to the situation. So for me, the overall understanding of where I stand and look at it is definitely come through. At the same time, going into different pockets in order to shift your perspective each time, that is how the visual is actually being made. So it's a multiple perspective which actually take place in order to create any of this what you see, and along with a kind of a linearity in thoughts and articulating that situation. So for me, the research part is completely hands-on to the space where exactly I'm dealing with, what exactly the space I'm into, and what kind of people I'm connecting. It doesn't mean that I'm kind of distancing away from them, but it's most of the time, the moment you take something off, because I mean, a camera angle is very important. It's not just as because you're positioning yourself and framing stuff. And I mean, of course, you can pan and you can move in and out and all that is happening. But the idea of looking at something is very much prevalent in all these works. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to a quick question for Despina, and also check if there are more questions. Despina, when we were, can you hear me, Despina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. When we were chatting a few days back, you were talking about, the kind of voluntary work that you do at prisons. And speaking of research, that came to my mind, that how we engage with people. And of course, I also wanted to highlight this extensive experience you have with cultures, having been born in Egypt, having studied in the United Kingdom, and then come and lived in Greece. You told me that you sort of lived through the regime, the sort of the war, the dictatorship. I want to get a picture of what goes on inside your head when you look at a subject, because how do all these years and the research that you're doing collapse into such a beautifully articulated piece of work, like that carpet, for instance, because it's so crisp and so articulate, and yet there is such clarity of thought. Could you tell us how, a little bit perhaps, about your process, about how does it happen inside your head?
Well, one thing I can say that I believe in is I believe in people who can engage in the problems that are around them and become part of, the helpers, somebody who can help the others. For me, this is very important. And this is why I try to do volunteer works with for instance, people who come from different parts of the world, who, like I did the one at the prison here for young men. And when I went there, because there were many refugees and migrants in that prison, young men from the age of 17 to 24, I'm giving you an example for that. And when I was asked by the prison, the people in charge, what kind of group would I want to take for this volunteer work? I said that I prefer to be with people, with young people who are completely, who are foreign to this land, to Greece, who don't speak the language so well. I mean, some of them didn't speak the language at all, and they have nobody to come and visit them when it's the visiting day. Because I speak Arabic, that helped a lot with groups of young kids, you know, guys who came from different parts of Arabic countries, or people who, even the ones who were, for instance, from Morocco, although we don't speak the same Arabic, but they understand the Egyptian Arabic. So I could get in touch with them and talk to them. And this is really my priority. I don't want to be outside looking into something. I want to participate and try to make our world better. And this is why I'm saying that what I do really, I consider myself a storyteller. I don't know if I'm an artist or what one can say that I am, but I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories that come from my particular background. Like my grandparents were of Greek origin, but they were born and raised in Asia Minor, what today is Turkey. And this is why also, as I probably told you, my family name, Maroglu, is 100% a Turkish name. It means the son of the architect. But nevertheless, my grandparents in the 20s of last century, 1920s, they were thrown out. There was a horrible war between Turkey and Greece, and they lost everything. And they ended up as immigrants or almost refugees in Egypt. And this is how they settled there, my parents, my father, in fact, he was 18 when he arrived from Turkey to Alexandria, and he passed all his life there. And this is where I was born and raised. So also in Egypt in those days, there was a mixture of populations. We were not all, for instance, all the Greeks together, all the English together, all the Egyptians. We were a mixture. And this is why all the people almost who come from Egypt, they speak different languages. So here now in Greece, where there is a big problem the last few years with all the immigration and the refugees who come over, or try to come over, and to escape into Europe. And there is I begin to sense an anger. At first it wasn't like that. The Greeks were very hospitable and all that. Now, over the years, and because of the economic crisis that hit Greece for 10 years now or more, they started to become more, let's say, racist. But I don't see it this way, you see, because I lived with those people all my life. So I understand the religion, I understand their language, I understand what's in their mind. And this is what makes the difference, really. So I'm hoping that after this current quarantine that we all been through, that we will start feeling more like human beings instead of excluding the other. We have to take a look at the other and get to know them.
Absolutely. What I am taking away at a personal level almost is what you said about just being able to speak with people. You know, the example that you were saying, you know, that when you were visiting these, you know, young men, I would imagine, who would have had not been in touch with their family, you know, that how, you know, some of these projects very often for us, and I relate to that, you know, as a kind of a researcher and a curator myself, that so often this, you know, it puts us in such a rare and such a lovely position to be able to engage with people, to be able to just connect with people, you know, and I think that is one of the gifts of being in the profession that we are, if you want to call it a profession. But just before we finish, we might just have time for one more question for Mary. Mary, there was a question and you answered it, but I am curious myself about the roots that are the prints of the roots behind you. I mean, would you just like to tell us a little bit from where they come? I mean, you've said that you hope to make it into an animation film one day, but it's something that's been constantly catching my attention behind you. Yeah.
Oh, so I'm also a gardener. I'm also a master composter. I'm a plant nerd. So I even have a huge root hanging upside down in another part of my apartment. So it's just these ideas that I was thinking about root systems and you know, it's funny because people are just starting to realize how incredible animals are and how intelligent and thinking. And at the same time, we're just starting to realize how incredible plants are and that the root systems and the worldwide mycelium web. So I'm talking about connections and how actually trees will help baby trees and they even help other species. So, and they send out signals to each other. So I'm really interested in talking about what's below the ground versus on top. So it's something I have a lot of these things all over the place. So as soon as I do drawings out of soot with a candle. So anyway, it's just from a cut paper and it's flowing around, which is kind of interesting. So, and I think that's one of the things is that people see a surface, they don't see what's below. And I think that goes with people too, right?
Yes, yes. I think that's a lovely note. We are very well on time. It's about 7:30. I think we should close very soon, unless anyone has a quick last final question. But I think that itself was a lovely note to kind of end with, and it kind of stitches the ideas that we've been discussing. You know, that this entire experience for us as being artists and curators and researchers is to actually try and go beneath the surface, under the surface, engage with people, and what like Despina has shown us the way that, you know, and I agree that after this experience of the quarantine that we are going through, if we are able to come out more strongly and be able to engage with people at a human level, I think that might just be one good thing, you know, because at least I'm sure all of us are sort of anxiously waiting for when we can get out and just, you know, be with our friends and family. So well, I mean, if I don't think there are any other questions. Yes, Helen also says thank you. Well, just before closing, I'd like to sort of extend my heartfelt gratitude, not only to all three of you, the artists, but to Helen and Leonika for putting us together. I mean, it's unimaginable to be sitting where I am and being able to speak to three outstanding people across 3 continents. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope all of those who are listening to us also had a nice time with us, and I look forward to another opportunity and hopefully an opportunity of meeting all of you in person. So if any one of you would like to say anything to close this, please. Yeah.
I would like to thank you all for inviting me into your meeting. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think this is really what it's all about connection, connecting with each other, which is a main thing in order to understand one another.